The year was 1942. The Pacific Ocean had become a graveyard of steel and fire. High above the clouds, a lone Mitsubishi A6M0 cut through the mist. Inside the cockpit was a man who would become a legend. His name was Saburo Sakai. He was the greatest ace of the Japanese Empire. A hunter, a samurai of the skies. But on that day, he was not looking for a fight. He was looking for a reason to remain human. This is the story of Saburo Sakai's mercy. The cockpit smelled of oil, sweat, and hot metal. Saburo Sakai could barely see. Blood ran down one eye. The other saw only fragments. Blue ocean, white clouds, a trembling horizon. Behind him, Guadalcanal burned beneath the morning sun. Ahead lay Rabaul, more than 800 kilometers away. His skull had been torn open by enemy fire. The radio was destroyed. Fuel was running low. His body begged for darkness, but his hands remained on the controls. Only one choice remained: die like a warrior, or live long enough to tell what happened. This is the story of the samurai of the skies. Before the legend, there was hunger. Sakai was born in 1,916 inches, the rural region of Saga, Japan, in a country that still valued discipline more than comfort. His father died when he was young. Money became scarce. Expectations grew heavier. At 16, he joined the Imperial Japanese Navy, not because war was romantic, but because the Navy offered food, order, and a way out. It also offered a brutal education, frozen barracks, harsh punishments, a system designed to tear hesitation out of a boy. He started at the bottom, cleaning, obeying, learning to disappear inside duty. But he wanted the sky, and the sky demanded more than courage. It demanded precision. It demanded silence. It demanded the kind of man capable of making a decision in 1 second and living with it for 50 years. By 1937, Sakai had earned his place in naval aviation. He trained hard, flew even harder, studied the sky as if it were a blade, wind, angle of the sun, distance, speed. Nothing could be wasted. The fighter became an extension of his body. First the A5M, then the Zero, light, fast, deadly in turns. In the early years of the Pacific War, that aircraft seemed almost unfair. Allied pilots faced it and vanished. Sakai became one of Japan's most feared aces. But that was not what made him unforgettable. Skill wins battles. Character survives them. The first moral test came over Java. Sakai spotted a Dutch transport plane flying low over the jungle. Orders were clear. Enemy aircraft were to be destroyed, armed or unarmed, military or civilian. He positioned himself behind it, prepared to fire. Then he saw the windows, faces, a woman, a child, not soldiers, not pilots, people trapped inside a machine incapable of fighting back. The decision took seconds. The consequence could last forever. If he let them live, he would disobey. If he fired, he would obey. What would you do when the rule is simple, but the truth is not? Sakai did not fire. He flew beside the transport, gestured for it to continue, then turned away. Later, he left the incident out of his combat report, not because it meant nothing, but because it meant too much. A soldier is trained to follow orders. A human being is forced to decide when obedience becomes cowardice. Sakai did not reject his country. He did not stop being a warrior. He simply refused to make civilians pay for a war they did not choose. In that moment, his legend began, not with a death, but with restraint. Then came Guadalcanal, the 7th of August 1942. American Marines landed on the island. Japan responded from Rabaul. Sakai and other Zero pilots launched on a brutal long-range mission, escorting bombers over the open sea. Distance itself was an enemy. Hours in a cramped cockpit, engine noise drilling into the skull. Salt air, heat, no room for weakness. Somewhere ahead, American fighters waited. And also the question every pilot faces sooner or later. Does your training survive when the plan collapses? The first day began with confidence. The Japanese formation reached Guadalcanal and found chaos below. Ships, landing craft, columns of smoke. Then the Wildcats appeared. The sky twisted into circles. Sakai engaged an American fighter piloted by James Park Sutherland. The duel was violent and close. The Wildcat absorbed damage that would have destroyed more fragile aircraft. Sakai kept firing, until Sutherland bailed out. Sakai had won that engagement, but in the sky, winning one fight often means turning your back on the next. The first day was not over yet. Sakai spotted what he believed were enemy fighters below him. He dove to attack. Too late, he realized they were SPD Dauntless dive bombers, armed with rear gunners. The sky exploded. Bullets tore through his cockpit. One shot ripped into his head. Glass shattered. Blood flooded his face. For 1 second, the Pacific disappeared. Only red remained. Only the roaring wind. Only the sudden understanding that a man can still be alive and already be halfway to death. The second day existed only inside his body. Time distorted. He blacked out and returned. The Zero began to fall. Sakai later recalled thinking about crashing the aircraft into an American ship. One final strike. One final act. That was the warrior's answer. Simple. Clean. Expected. It was also tempting, because death would end the pain and transform failure into a final gesture. But another answer emerged. Return, report, survive, tell the truth. The harder path was not dying. The harder path was continuing when every nerve begged him to stop. He leveled the aircraft, adjusted the fuel mixture, searched for landmarks across the sea. Volcanoes became signposts. Openings in the clouds became mercy. The right side of his body throbbed. His vision failed. Wind tore through his wound inside the shattered cockpit. 4 hours and 47 minutes. That was how long he flew wounded back to Rabaul. Not in triumph. Not in glory. In agony. Inch by inch. Breath by breath. The pilot who had spared civilians now had to decide whether his own life deserved to be saved. The third day was the landing. Rabaul finally appeared. But arriving was not the same as surviving. Sakai circled the runway. Once. Twice. Again. He could not judge the approach clearly. Fuel was nearly gone. His vision ruined. Men on the ground watched the ghost aircraft sway through the air. On the final attempt, the wheels touched earth. The Zero rolled forward. Stopped. Men ran toward him. Some expected to find a corpse. Instead, they found a pilot still trying to speak. Sakai refused help long enough to deliver his mission report. Only then did he collapse. Duty first. Flash second. That was the code he had been given. Whether it was honor or madness depended on who was looking. Surgeons worked on him. His life remained. His sight did not fully return. He would never see the world the same way again. And still, the war was not finished with him. Sakai trained younger pilots. Watched Japan's advantage disappear. Enemy aircraft became tougher, faster, more numerous. The old certainty cracked. Sakai had fought in a war of expansion. Now he witnessed a war of attrition. Young men arrived proud, then vanished. Their chairs remained empty. Their beds stayed neatly made. Their names left roll call and entered memory. This is where legends become dangerous. They make death seem clean. Sakai knew the truth. Death had blood. It had smoke. It had mothers waiting at home. He returned to combat in 1944. Older, partially blind in one eye, still lethal. On one mission, he mistakenly approached a formation of American Hellcats, believing they were friendly aircraft. The trap closed quickly. 15 fighters against a single Zero. A less experienced pilot would have died in seconds. Sakai escaped. That moment revealed the strange mathematics of war. Experience can save a man, but it cannot save a country determined to spend men faster than it learns. By 1945, Japan was collapsing. Cities burned. Pilots were sent on missions with ever smaller chances of return. The line between courage and waste grew thin. Sakai remained loyal. But loyalty had changed shape. It no longer meant believing victory was near. It meant fulfilling duty in a world where duty itself had become suspect. On August 18, after Japan announced it would accept the terms of surrender, but before the formal signing, Japanese pilots attacked American B-32 bombers near Tokyo. Sakai participated. An American crewman died. The war was ending. Men were still dying. That is the cruelty of history. It rarely ends at the exact moment a speech says it has ended. And then came silence. No engines, no orders, no next mission. Sakai survived the war and entered a country forced to look at itself without flags. He opened a small printing business. Spoke about the conflict, met former enemies, sent his daughter to study in the United States. The man once trained to destroy American aircraft eventually extended his hand to shake American hands. That does not erase the past. Nothing does. But it proves the past does not get the final word unless we surrender it to the past. History often turns Sakai into a symbol of pure honor. That is too easy. He fought for an empire that caused immense suffering. He killed in combat. He followed orders many times. He was not untouched by the era he lived in. But that is precisely why the choice over Java matters. Virtue is not proven in comfort. It appears when a man shaped by war refuses an unnecessary act of cruelty. The transport plane was defenseless. He had the power. He did not use it. History should remember that without pretending it erases everything else. Centuries earlier, Miyamoto Musashi became famous not for swinging the sword wildly, but for understanding timing, restraint, and the cost of action. Sakai's battlefield was not a duel. It was industrial war. But the old truth remained. The decisive movement is not always the strike. Sometimes it is the hand that does not pull the trigger. Sometimes the hardest victory is over the part of yourself that wants obedience to excuse everything. So ask yourself the real question. If your commander gave the order, if your enemy could not fight back, if nobody would ever know what you chose, what would you do? Sakai answered once over the jungle, then answered again over the Pacific, refusing to die before fulfilling his duty. Mercy first, endurance second, legend last. That is why Saburo Sakai was remembered not only as an ace, but as something rarer. A warrior who discovered that discipline without conscience is just another name for fear dressed as loyalty. The samurai of the skies did not become immortal because he won every battle. He did not. He became immortal because, inside the worst machine humanity ever built, he preserved a single human decision. One sped aircraft, One flight home through blood and darkness. One life long enough to reconsider the meaning of victory. That is the legacy, not perfection, not innocence. Choice. And in history, choice is the only thing still capable of speaking after the guns fall silent.